Hello and welcome back to the Sweat Capital podcast. Today, we're very lucky to be joined by Graham Kerr, who is Chief Executive Officer at South32 Limited. Thanks for joining us, Graham.
No worries. Thanks, Charles.
Thanks, Graham. Our first question for you, and a question we'd like to ask all our guests, is what was your first ever job? Is you find often a good story behind it or something you might have learnt? So we'll start there.
Job in terms of mining when I qualified or
First ever job.
Okay, so I used to work with one of my friends and we used to dig septic tanks for a builder that we do.
Oh, wow. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's pretty grim. Particularly in Perth, when it can get pretty bloody warm. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So there you go. So you've come a long way since then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like university, Graham, what were you like? Like what were your interests? What were you studying?
I think, look, I've got
Septic tanks.
Yeah. So I've got 3 kids at university now. One's finally out, but I think probably like those 3 kids, the first couple of years in university wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I sort of just drifted to a few different things, and then sort of just coming from Perth, mining's obviously a big part of it.
Yep.
Lucky enough to get hired by BHP as a graduate before I finished university, and that's the pathway I took.
So you were working and studying for the back end of that degree, was it? Or-
No, so I was working for some small businesses.
Yeah.
And so sort of getting experience in that, but through the last year, about halfway through, BHP ran a recruitment process, I applied and got a job subject to qualifying.
Oh, cool.
Or
Yeah, nice.
graduating, yeah.
Yeah, nice. And so was that in like a mining sort of geo role? Were you?
So funny enough, my background I did in the end was actually commerce.
Yeah, cool.
So more commerce, bit of IT, but probably pretty much all my jobs in BHP were more operationally focused,
Yeah,
particularly in the early years than they were on the actual commerce side.
Yeah, cool. So how do you get BHP to trust in you that you're good to do the operational side of things? Just having studied accounting, I guess, at university.
Yeah, so probably I'd say first couple of jobs, I was lucky enough to go into their graduate program, and their graduate program was designed to give you as many different experiences as you can over the first 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So in probably the first 6 months, I worked at Perth office, Newman, then I lived in Port Hedland for about 18 months. And probably in Port Hedland, working up there, it's very much about supporting the operations. And I guess coming from my background, so my dad's actually a stevedore, so a wharfie down in Fremantle.
Yeah.
So the ability to actually connect to people and talk to people was something that I probably always had through him.
Yeah.
So that probably helped when I was working up there, which sort of made it was much easier to engage with people, and
The mine side.
that's what I probably enjoy doing.
Bridge the gap
Yeah,
from head
cool.
office to the people out on the ground.
Yeah, and used to get the phone calls from like the guy running iron ore at the time, give me these shipping numbers because the union guys won't give it to me. So I played football with some of them. So I go down and talk to them and say, okay, well, what's it looking like? And they give you the answers, and that's how it works.
Were you much of a footballer, Graham?
Look, I enjoy playing football. So I was lucky enough to play at East Fremantle and South Fremantle
Wow.
when I was really young, but probably more of a brawler than a skilled player.
bit of a temper. So Will used to try that sort of stuff the year he played AFL with us.
And if you look at me,
He said that
doesn't go very well for me.
Yeah. Didn't turn out well. Got concussed, I think, the first time he tried that. Yeah. Good.
All right. Yeah. And so we understand you worked a bit like in the diamonds unit at BHP.
Yeah. So I'm lucky enough in BHP. I worked in a variety of different roles, but if you talk about why I love mining, so I love mining because I actually believe it actually makes a difference in people's lives forever. Probably my time in the diamonds part of BHP where I worked at Acadi is the best experience. I was lucky enough to go there when I was doing what's called an implementation review before they built the project. And the Acadi diamond mines in the Northwest Territories of Canada, when you're up there, it's 9 months of the year of snow. It's 3 months a year of total darkness. Coldest day I had with wind chill was probably minus 60 kind of degrees. You don't see the sunlight for ages. I went up there and I was involved in what they call independent peer review when they built the project. Then I helped them with a little bit of commissioning. Then later on, I went back there to work there. And then I ran it for a period of time at the end of my career at BHP, where I ran the whole business unit. So in that time frame, I got to see a part of the world where poverty was really huge. Domestic violence, drug abuse, alcohol was rife through the community because they didn't have much of a future and opportunities. And over probably the 15 years I got to see that operation, I saw, all of a sudden people have nice houses. They have even snowmobiles, they have nice cars. Kids go off to uni, come back, and some work in the mines, some set up their own businesses, just change the communities. And that was all done through mining. And it was also a mine that's probably built in the most pristine environment in the world where they never had any issues around spills, damage. And that really drove, to my mind, if you look at South32's purpose, it's all about making a difference. Because in the end, in our industry, we don't own the resources that we mine, the communities do. And if they don't get value out of you being there, you're not going to go anywhere.
Very interesting.
Yeah. But I
I
guess,
loved it up there. It was great.
yeah, I mean, pretty cool. Yeah. And I guess what's interesting to our audience too is like, obviously it might seem like a natural progression for you to end up like running that unit, but I guess what are the steps that it took to, get BHP to entrust in you that you were the man to sort of run that?
Look, I think a little bit is, if you're going to be honest, you got to sort of look at all the different avenues. One is a willingness to sort of go to different places.
Yeah.
The first time I went up to a Cardi as a younger person, it's not the choice location. I had, my wife was supportive and she came up there with me without actually having seen it. She actually thought it was on the ocean. And we worked out it's a huge, massive lake that you're on. That was a bit of an eye-opener.
A rude surprise.
But I think, and I was having a chat with one of my son's friends recently. He's probably about 27, 28. And he was talking about, well, I feel like I'm sort of progressing on this career path without a real specialty. And I said, actually, my advice to you, by the time you get to 30, is to have as many different experiences as you can, because then I think you're far more well-rounded. And I think going back to the comment about BHP and their graduate program, they gave me lots of opportunities to work in different countries, different commodities and different roles. Yeah. And I think that helped. That really helped to sort of get a breadth of experience that, sort of put in your position. So going back to your point, I think it was a breadth to help getting the job, supportive partner at the time, right place, right time.
Yep.
Yeah.
And along the way, you're presumably assuming leadership positions, well, based off, the discussion so far. And where do you learn those skills though? Because I imagine as it's all well and good to know commodities markets and how a mine operates, but the actual leadership soft skills, where did they come?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think it's a bit of, it's how you've grown up and some of the things you learn when you're young, but also what do you pick up along the way? So look, I've been lucky enough to work, if you think some colourful characters in the mining industry, I worked with Chip Goodyear for a while, Mary Poppers. Each of those leaders have something that they actually give you and teach you. But I think you can't lose sight of who you are and what works for you.
Yeah.
But it's all about how do I get a little bit better? And I think, I got that by working for a variety of different leaders, look at their strengths and weaknesses, try and work out what works for you and adapt and sort of grow your own leadership over time. I mean, I would be the first one to say in South32 BHP rooms, I will never, ever be the smartest person in the room, but I actually think I'm good at getting the best out of people. I'm good at communicating with people. Alex might be laughing in the other corner, but that's what I think is my strength of getting people to sort of be the best that they can be.
Yeah. Do you draw any ties? You mentioned you're involved in footy clubs and that sort of thing. Do you draw any ties between your origins in some sporting environments and your dad was a wharfie, worked in teams? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit, but I think there's also, and if you think about South32, and we set up South32, we had a real big drive that whether you're the chair or whether you're the janitor or you're operating a truck or you're whatever you're doing, plant operator, you know better or no different than anyone else.
Yeah.
A lot of organisations have hierarchy and they have status. Yep. We try and not have that. And certainly I think, our board's been really great at being super approachable. They've been really great in engaging people. I think that sets a tone for an organisation. So to your point, I think there's a little bit around what you picked up, but then there's a little bit about how do you hold yourself and how do you actually lead.
Yeah. No, fantastic.
Yeah, cool. And so before we delve into South32 a bit deeper, just to touch on your final time at BHP before the demerger. So you were Group CFO there. What was it like being in that role? I imagine capital allocation at BHP is pretty, insane. You've got huge decisions to make. Can you just sort of take us inside that role?
Every analyst in Australia passing their, 5 cents on what you should be doing.
The numbers are so big, you just can't cut off a few of those. I can't think about it. Otherwise, it can be look, it was an interesting time because I went in there, to memory, just around the GFC was starting.
Yeah.
And BHP had been on this big growth pipeline at that stage of wanting to spend $85 billion. So had to make some decisions about how we rationalise capital. What do we think about the capital, and how do we actually also take costs out of the business at the same time? And if you think about, a CFO versus CEO obviously sets the direction of the value, the direction where the organisation's going, but the CFO's job a lot of the time is to wear the black hat.
Yeah.
So that's a role that you've got to learn to play in that environment where you're a bit more challenging, you're a little bit more holding people to account. But in an organisation as large as BHP, you have to do that through people.
Yeah.
So again, if you can't work well through people, well, then you struggle in that space. I think I was lucky enough because by the time I'd moved to the CFO role, I think I had worked out that I'd lived in 5 different countries and moved 16 times across BHP. So I had a lot of connections within the organisation, which made it a little bit easier. And I think the one thing BHP never lacks is great quality people, because I mean, they are the world's largest resource company, so they attract really good people. So you always have good people around you. It's just about, again, how you unleash them and get to do the work. But the capital allocation decision was the challenge, because everyone in that business had their own pet projects.
Yeah.
And you really had to say, well, why today? Why do you have to do this? And then you have to come back to the numbers about how does it stack up.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Wow. And how do you manage those competing, at times competing objectives of different business units? Like, you're never going to get it fully harmonized. It's just interesting because a lot of people always get fascinated in our game with, the startup and how much of a challenge that is. I actually think that's arguably as much of a challenge in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I mean, in the end, whether you're an organisation the size of BHP, South32 or a startup, I think you've got to cut the cloth, if you like, about what you can afford to actually do.
Yeah.
So that is probably understanding very clearly about how do you run a new business. And when you get to a business about our size or BHP, it's, well, what balance sheet do you want to have and why do you want to have it? And particularly if you think about South32 versus BHP, we generally have lower margins. So we have a stronger balance sheet, relatively speaking, which allows us not to combine financial and commodity leverage.
Yeah.
So I think understanding what those constraints are then tells you how much money you've got to spend.
Yep.
Because the one thing I can tell you, having been in the industry in 30 years, the one thing that people never get right is commodity prices. You pay a whole lot of people to come up commodity price ranges and they are never right.
Yeah, right.
Now, so sort of understanding what the range of you can afford and then sort of driving things through that as a starting point.
There you go.
Yeah, cool. And then so on that, on the demerger, that happened in 2014, 2015, is that right?
It started way before that.
Oh, yeah, right.
Probably about 2 years of the process of demerging. At that stage, it was the world's largest demerger.
So how large was it in a quantum perspective at the time?
I've got some statistics somewhere if you want.
Yeah. Pull them up. Pull them up.
Wasn't him, mate?
Yes. We've put you very much on the spot there, Graham.
Yeah, because it's a while ago now.
This is meant to be our job, knowing these.
Well, put it this way: at one stage, we had, I think it was almost over 1,000 people working full time on this.
Wow.
And the demerger.
On the demerger itself.
And trying to keep that quiet in terms of not having leaked out was obviously a challenge in itself. And look, the whole reason for the demerger, as part of the CFO job, I also looked after acquisitions and divestments.
Yep.
And we'd been selling things off piecemeal for a period of time, but every transaction takes time and effort. So the plan was to say, okay, well, how do we quickly accelerate that, which created the simpler, stronger BHP? But also, if you think about the Australian market, there was really a lack of a mid-tier mining company.
Absolutely.
And you go back to that capital allocation decision, you can put your capital into a business like, WA Iron Ore, which is making 60 to 70% margins.
Yeah.
You're no longer putting your money into businesses like Worsley, which is probably making about a 20% margin. Still a good business, but you're just making these tough choices. If you can free up that business to get that investment, you're still making a decent PT. To sort of give you a sense on that. So the demerger statistics at one stage, so we had over 1,400 people actually involved at one stage.
Wow.
The demerger process itself to execute it was 4,800 individual steps, 1,000 separate due diligence issues, 175,000 working documents, and 48 different competition clearances.
Oh, yeah, right, of course, because that would have been a big issue as well.
Yeah, all the different commodities, different governments, jurisdictions. And one of the big challenges for us is, talking to the South African government even.
Yeah, right. You don't know that's down there as well.
So why go through all that? What was the play?
Look, in the end, I think if you look over time and performance, I think it's been good for BHP because the business has been simplified and they do a great job running large businesses where they can apply their model and scale. And I think for South32, while we've changed our portfolio a lot, we can talk about that in a second, I think the shareholders have had a good experience along the way in terms of share price increase, but also money we've returned in the form of dividends and capital management. And these assets, take great example, when we started, Kingston probably had about a 6-year mine life, 6 to 8 years. We're now 11 years post the merger. We've got about 6 to 8 years currently, and we're hoping to boost that back into double-digit figures.
Yeah, well,
So they're things that probably wouldn't have happened under BHP.
because they would have spent the money exploring.
Wouldn't have meant us money exploring.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been a focus point.
Yeah.
It's not only good for our shareholders, it means the people that work at Kingston, the communities who rely on it, they all have a longer life as well.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And then so just like you personally making the shift from CFO to CEO, like so you inherit all these assets, you're sort of setting the culture. And as you said before, the CEO's role is more about setting the direction of the company. How do you find that?
You're no longer the grump.
Yeah, I look at the black hat. Had to find the black hat for me. Look, I think if I'd start back at the CFO job, I'd always describe myself as a reluctant CFO. So while my background is in that commercial space, the jobs I always enjoyed and the job I had before that was more running businesses for BHP.
Yeah.
So that's what I probably really enjoyed. So I never wanted to be the CFO forever. But it was definitely a good development experience and a good opportunity. Switching modes to South32 and sort of how you set up the company was probably a good opportunity for me because, like all organisations, you look at where you are today and you say, it'd be nice if this was different. It'd be nice if that was different.
Yeah.
Could we try something different in this space? So we certainly had pretty much a clean piece of paper when we thought about name for South32, when we thought about things like values and purpose, but using that as a platform to sort of talk about what the future was going to be. So, for example, when we started South32, probably about, statistically, if you think about the value, 45% was Australian, 40% was in Southern Africa. So rather than pay some fancy marketing firm to come up with a name, we decided to run a competition about names.
All right.
And we got a whole lot of, internally, we got a whole lot of South African names from Southern Africa. And we got a whole lot of Australian names from Australia. There was one guy called David Richardson, and he came up with a line that basically joins
all the tenements.
Joins along the Joburg, Perth kind of thing. And that's the 32 parallel. So South 32. So he said 32 South.
Yeah.
And we just switched it around. And at that stage, we were the only ticker on the ASX that had numbers. And our CFO at the time, Brendan Harris, who now runs Samfire. Brendan was like, oh, well, you can't have that. People don't have numbers in the name. So, that's a little bit different. So we went with South 32. And it's funny, when we launched the name, the people started talking about, well, is it like a shopping centre? Is it a vodka? So all that kind of stuff came out. But even the values, we got a group of our high potential people to say, okay, we've come from a great organisation at BHP, but if we're going to be different, what are the values you want? They went away and developed the values, and my lead team did one grammar change out of all the values, not one other thing changed.
Yeah,
so I think we sort of built things a little bit from that way to sort of get people involved, but also build an element of excitement.
Yeah, it's probably the smartest way to derive your company values by actually going out to the people that work for you and asking them what they want.
What are they going to live? Or, engaging your young up and coming professionals or, mining operational people, what do they actually think? Going back to you think about that value. So we used to be 45% Australia, 40% Southern Africa. When we started commodity split, we were probably about 50% bulks, mainly thermal and met coal.
Yeah.
No growth options because obviously the assets that people didn't like.
Yeah.
Today we're 90% base metals, including aluminium. Within 2 years, virtually 50% or more of our business is in the Americas.
Wow.
So very different organisation than we were when we started. And that's come through lots of the great work the teams have done.
And do you think your ability to do that so quickly came from being so well-travelled and experienced across the world?
Mate, 11 years doesn't feel like it's been quick. If you sort of sat down and said when you started and you set it up, I thought, this will take us 5 years. It'd be easy. It's much harder and longer than you think it's going to be.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I guess so you are coming towards the end of your tenure now. That's fascinating seeing that play out, like the whole transition period, because I'm not sure how these things usually work, but the person taking over was announced back in, was it May?
Probably not May. Probably it might have been around July. So Matt, who's coming in, actually currently was working for Anglo. So he had obviously had a period of time that he couldn't work for us.
Yeah.
So that's why there's a bit of a delay before he starts, but he actually starts first week of Feb. Yeah. And then the transition is obviously it'll be dictated by what he needs. My ultimate goal is to make sure that he's successful going forward. Like him, one of my best mates actually works for him. So he's one of the best leaders he's worked for. He's technically super strong. He's really hardworking. He's enthusiastic. I think he'll be good for the next stage of the journey we're going. The board's talked about the October sometime during the transition is sometime during the year. It's really dictated by what works for Matt.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. No, it's pretty incredible to hear you speak, so openly about, what's important for you guys as a business is there's so many things that go on in the world, but the values and getting your people right seems to be the most important thing, even in this whole transition phase to the new CEO. That seems ensuring that.
And it's an interesting one. The one thing we have done well, I think, at South32, if you look at today, so Dino, who runs FMG, I think,
Yeah, we know him, right?
where did he come from? South32.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mike Fraser, who runs Goldfields.
Yeah.
South32. Brendan Harris.
Right. Yeah. So what a breeding ground for
Rowena Smith that runs Australian Strategic Minerals.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Oh, yeah.
And if you listen to, we remember so vividly Dino, the way he speaks about their North Star.
Yeah, the values.
And it was I've brought it up in so many different forums since, because it was something so noticeable about his leadership, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dino's a great guy, but all of them have turned out to be really great leaders, which is awesome to see.
Yeah, for sure. And then so this next phase for you, so you finish up at South32, sometime this year, I'm guessing.
Yep.
What's next for you? What are you?
Probably a break first.
Yeah, fair enough.
Not had much of a break over probably this 12 years or the previous period of time. Then sit back and see what I feel like doing. Could range from as simple as being a farmer, or maybe going around again, or don't know. Haven't thought that much about it. Like I said, there's a lot of, you look at a lot of people when they sort of finish these roles, they sort of lose a little bit the last 3 to 6 months because they get distracted or business things happen.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that what I hand over to Matt is ready to go for him and set him up for success. And then I'll think about what I do next.
Yeah.
Cool. And you're on the board of Freo, so
I was going to say that's the one thing. I want to see Freo get a premiership.
if
If
you're waiting a long time.
It's our time.
Brisbane Lions 3-peat, I think, is probably on the agenda. No, good one.
Yeah. So thanks for your time today, Graham. It's been awesome to unpack your career and sort of delve into South32 as well. Our last question I'd like to ask all guests is, what's one piece of advice you'd give to a younger version of yourself? We usually say like a 20-year-old version, because that's what age we were when we started the podcast. So think back to that version of
tanks back then.
Yeah.
Probably.
So look, I'm probably going to break the rules and give you two. One is, I think you've always got to sit back and decide, what do you want out of life? So there's a book called The Cafe on the Edge of the World. Have you ever read that?
No, right, no.
Yeah. And it talks about, there's all this thing around, what does a career give you? Well, what ultimately makes you happy is more important than anything. So I think if someone's young like that, I try and advise people to think about that first, in saying, I can't get my 27-year-old son to read it, but I can try. But the second thing is, like I said earlier, I think, people get too worried about the next step in their career when they're young. Just get focused on as many experiences as you can, whether they are in different countries, different roles, just to sort of build up that breadth of experience. I think that's the single biggest piece of advice I'd give people.
Yeah.
No, awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Graham. The way you speak so candidly about values and making pursuing opportunities to make you happy is something that certainly resonated with me. And look forward to getting this one out to our audience.
For sure. Thanks,
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.